Enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. My husband, Evander Yun, returned in triumph, only to arrive as my sister-in-law, Sylvia, furious that I refused to gift her a hairpin, threw a harmless flower snake at me. Caught off guard, I stumbled backward into the lotus pond and lost consciousness. When I awoke, my husband addressed me with chilling indifference. "It was just a snake. Why must you be so calculating about it? You are utterly disgraceful." The joy of seeing him after a year apart evaporated in an instant. A cold anger rose within me, and I decided to feign confusion to provoke him, asking, "Who are you? What am I being calculating about?" A flicker of shock crossed his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by agitation as he produced a divorce decree. He lied, saying, "It matters not if you've lost your memory. We had an agreement long ago to divorce after 1 year. The time has come. You just need to sign and apply your fingerprint." I lowered my gaze and firmly wrote my name, Elora Shen. He had no idea that the moment he divorced me, a great calamity would immediately descend upon the house of Yun. Before I could even open my eyes, the sharp, shrewish voice of Sylvie Yun drilled into my ears like a sharp, stinging needle. "Hemph! Who told her to refuse me the azure, glazed hairpin? She even dared to say it was a reward from the Empress Dowager." Her tone was filled with disdain, utterly disrespectful. The Empress Dowager gives her so many things. How could she possibly remember them all? What's the harm in giving it to me? She married into our Yun family. Her possessions belong to the Yun family now. Why bother distinguishing between them? A familiar, deep male voice interjected, heavy with clear annoyance and reprimand. "That's enough. Your usual arrogance is one thing, but Elora is an imperial princess. If something truly happened to her, who among us could bear that responsibility?" It was Evander. He was finally back. Evander, my husband. On our wedding night, he received an imperial edict and departed urgently for the northern frontier, and he was gone for 1 full year. I remained in the Yun residence, serving his mother in his place, caring for his younger siblings, and shouldering the management of the Yun family's industries. A month ago, Evander finally drove the northern enemies back across the border, securing a glorious victory. He was returning triumphant to the capital. I had waited day and night, longing for this moment, and finally, the day had arrived. I was ecstatic, personally arranging a grand feast to welcome him home. I never expected Sylvia to storm in and demand my azure, glazed hairpin. In the year I had been married into the Yun family, I treated this sister-in-law like my own flesh and blood, giving her the best of everything first. However, that hairpin was a gift from the Empress Dowager herself for my coming-of-age ceremony. It was deeply meaningful. I couldn't even bear to wear it normally, keeping it safely tucked away in a jade box. Sylvia barged directly into my chambers. The moment she saw the azure, glazed hairpin in its box, she coveted it and insisted on taking it. She held her chin high, her expression arrogant, showing no regard for me as her sister-in-law. "Big brother has returned a hero. From now on, I'll be qualified to attend banquets at the palace. My current jewelry is no longer worthy of my station. We must hurry and procure new pieces, so as not to lose face for the Yin family. Give me this hairpin. If you refuse, sister-in-law, just wait until big brother returns. I'll tell him how you've been bullying me." In the past, Sylvia had committed a grave offense. To preserve her reputation, I had almost offended the noble consort herself. Yet, Sylvia showed not a hint of remorse, and now she was fantasizing about attending palace banquets. It was pure delusion. Remembering she was Evander's sister, I forced down my anger and explained patiently. But no matter how I tried to persuade her, Sylvia would not back down. In the end, seeing that I would not soften, she waited until I went down to the main hall to check on the preparations, and threw a snake onto my silk dress. I was raised in the estate of Prince Jin. Every time I stepped out, I was attended by a score of maids and matrons. How could I ever have encountered something as frightening as a snake? Utterly terrified, my vision went dark, my legs gave out, and I collapsed into the lotus pond beside us. And yet even now, Sylvia was still muttering resentfully. "I didn't know she was that cowardly. It was just a flower snake. It's not even poisonous." I slowly fluttered my eyes open, and my gaze met the profound, dark stare of Evander. His gaze was as deep as a still pool, yet tinged with a distinct distance and indifference. When he saw I was conscious, he visibly sighed in relief, his brow relaxing slightly. His tone, however, remained utterly cold. "You are awake." I parted my lips, ready to pour out all the grievances and hardships I had endured for the past year, but he cut me off curtly. "I have already disciplined her. "You should not be so petty. It was only a snake. You are an imperial princess, how could you be so terrified? It is utterly disgraceful." I nearly laughed aloud from sheer anger, my shoulders trembling uncontrollably. For this entire past year, I had exhausted my mind and spirit cleaning up the endless troubles his family caused, stressing myself to the point of exhaustion. Now, his sister dares to terrorize her sister-in-law with a snake, and he, her brother, impassively tells me not to hold a grudge, not to be disgraceful. When I remembered that in this long, agonizing year, Evander had not sent me so much as a single letter, a bitter sorrow welled up inside me. I felt how utterly undeserving he was. Evander, completely oblivious to the emotions within me, continued his lecture, shifting the entire blame for the incident onto my shoulders. The eldest sister-in-law is like a mother. With mother away at the mountain temple to pray, the younger siblings at home are your sole responsibility. Sylvia caused this disaster today because you failed to fulfill your duties as her sister-in-law. Staring at Evander's impatient face, and thinking of the incessant, exhausting problems within the Yun estate, an indescribable fury ignited within me. My expression turned cold, and I asked him directly, "Who are you? What am I supposedly being calculating about?" The Yin siblings, along with the attendant maids, froze in stunned silence. The entire room became deathly quiet. I continued my pretense, pointing at Evander and Sylvia, and shouted angrily, "My estate of Prince Jin is strictly managed. How did these two strangers barge in here, as if it were deserted?" The maids instantly panicked, scrambling in all directions. A short while later, the imperial physician frowned deeply and declared, "Her Highness suffered an invasion of cold air after falling into the water. I am afraid she has lost her memories." To my surprise, Evander suddenly became extremely agitated. He pulled out a divorce decree, his gaze shifting away guiltily. "You and I had an agreement that we would part ways after 1 year of marriage. That time has now come. You should sign and apply your seal." I had absolutely no memory of any such pact between us. My eyes scanned the decree. The calligraphy was strong and powerful, proof that his mind had been made up for a long time. An inexplicable sadness rose in my chest. He was, after all, the young general I had once secretly adored. That year, our fleeting meeting beneath the plum blossom trees had captured my heart and never left. Even now, a part of me was still reluctant to let go. The Yun siblings had committed serious offenses, and their mother, Lady Yun, had acted in even more immoral ways. If I remained at the Yun residence, they could all continue to use the prestige of the estate of Prince Jin as a shield to maintain their safety. Evander, the truth is, Before I could finish my sentence, a woman dressed in light battle armor stormed into the room. "Evander, you promised to show me the capital city. I have been waiting for ages." The woman draped herself over Evander's arm with shocking familiarity, leaning her entire body against his. Her actions were audacious and intimate, completely heedless of the scrutinizing stares from everyone else. No proper lady of the capital would ever dare to act in such a manner. She glanced at me, her eyes holding no malice, only a sizing, curious look. But for me, that look was as cold as being plunged into an ice cellar. Jiao Yu was raised on the border. Evander explained, his body visibly stiffening as an awkward expression crossed his face. She is kind, simple and pure, unused to the false ceremonies of the capital. Yet he did not push her away. On the contrary, he explained on her behalf, his tone gentle, carrying hints of adoration and indulgence. So, this is how Evander protects the person he truly cares about. He hadn't cared that I was frightened by a snake to the point of fainting, simply because in his eyes, I was never worthy of his concern. In that instant, everything became painfully clear. I let out a small, bitter laugh at my own stupidity. Waving for a maid to bring brush and ink, I signed my name to the divorce decree without a moment's hesitation. The decree was prepared in duplicate. I ordered one copy to be secured and the other to be sent immediately to the imperial clan court for official filing. I then stood up gracefully, preparing to change my robes and enter the palace to report to His Majesty. The divorce of an imperial princess could not go unreported. Seeing my decisive actions, Evander quickly extracted his arm from Jiao Yu's embrace. He blocked my path, his expression complicated. "There is no need to be so hasty. We can take our time and discuss this." I raised my head, meeting his gaze with perfect serenity. The youth had once galloped toward me, using his silver spear to pluck a branch of plum blossoms for me, had finally died, drowned in my memories, and smiled, composed and serene, my voice perfectly steady, as if I truly had forgotten everything. "Since I have forgotten General Yun, it must mean our shared fate was too shallow. I cast a deliberate glance at Jiao Yu, who lingered behind him, and added meaningfully, leaving a bit sooner also helps to make room for the newcomer. Evander frowned, opening his mouth to explain. There is no newcomer. Jiao Yu saved my life on the border. I only regard her as a blood sister. Despite his words, the hand that was bearing my way slowly fell to his side. A blood sister. I glanced over at Sylvia, who was pouting with dissatisfaction. I wondered how pleased she would be to suddenly gain another sister. Just as I was about to board my carriage, Sylvia chased after me, pointing a finger and shouting loudly, "Sister-in-law, you can leave, but you must leave that azure, glazed hairpin behind for me." In the past, out of love for their family, I had doted on her, spoiling her rotten. It seemed that in the end, it only made her forget her place. I did not feel anger, only indifference. I turned my head and calmly instructed my personal maid to retrieve the complete inventory list of my dowry, the estate of Prince Jin. Know that we are divorced, everything that belongs to me must be returned. Not one item shall be missing. The carriage began to roll away from the Yun residence. Evander likely had no idea that my departure today was merely the prelude to the catastrophe about to engulf him. 1 month prior, at a flower viewing banquet hosted by the lady of the Marquise of Changning, Sylvia had the misfortune of wearing an identical outfit to the noble consort's niece, Clara Gu. Both women were dressed in peach, pink sleeveless jackets worn over butterfly, embroidered silk skirts. Sylvia's father was a military man, and all 3 Yin siblings were, by nature, tall and broad-shouldered. In a man, such a physique would be praised as powerful and imposing. But for Sylvia, a young woman, to wear such a delicate peach color on her large frame, it inevitably created a jarring and unsuitable sight. Before we departed for the Marquise of Changning's estate, I had specifically warned her. But Sylvia was obsessed with the color and retorted loudly, "Pink suits me best. I will wear it." She shot me a disdainful look and added with a pout, "Or do you want me to dress like you, all old-fashioned and boring?" As a result, when Sylvia and Clara stood next to each other, Sylvia's appearance only served to highlight Miss Gu's delicate, graceful figure. A noble lady standing nearby, not recognizing Sylvia, murmured softly, "Which family's daughter is that? With shoulders that broad and a back that thick, she looks just like a bandit from a mountain stronghold." Amidst the burst of muffled laughter, Sylvia's face turned crimson, and she glared at Clara as if she wanted to burn holes through her. At that moment, I was pulled aside by the lady of Changning for a chat and, for a moment, I wasn't paying attention. In that brief lapse, a commotion erupted outside. By the time I rushed over, the damage was done. Sylvia and Clara, already at odds over their matching clothes, had coincidentally run into each other by the garden pond. Sylvia, having been spoiled her entire life, had a temper that matched her size and had actually pushed Clara into the water. Fortunately, several matrons at the estate knew how to swim and immediately dove in to pull her out, averting a greater tragedy. The Gu family was the noble consort's maternal family, and their power had grown considerably in recent years thanks to her favor. They certainly would not let this matter rest. The noble consort was even more furious, publicly demanding an explanation from the Yun family. At that time, my mother-in-law was away at a mountain temple, and since Sylvia had attended the banquet with me, I had no choice but to take responsibility. I immediately entered the palace that night to beg my imperial uncle, the emperor, to intervene immediate. Then, I personally brought extravagant gifts to the Gu estate to apologize. Only then was I barely able to smooth things over. However, the noble consort still held a grudge and would find opportunities to make things difficult for me. Before that trouble had even settled, a new one struck. The Yun family's second son, Alan Yun, got into a massive brawl at the Zui Xianlu tavern over a newly debuted courtesan. Relying on his larger group, he dared to break the other man's leg and arrogantly declared, "Do you have any idea who I am that you dare to dream of Xiao Chutao? Today, I'll teach you a lesson you'll never forget." The lackeys following Alan were even more brazen. "Our second young master is merciful. If it weren't for your broken leg, he'd make you crawl between his legs." And the man who was beaten and humiliated was none other than Prince Shou, the Empress Dowager's own son. Prince Shou had long resided in his own fiefdom and had returned to the capital specifically to celebrate the Empress Dowager's birthday. He never imagined a trip to the Zuishanlu would result in a broken leg. Although my father, Prince Jin, was not born to the Empress Dowager, he was raised by her, and their bond was as strong as mother and son. The Empress Dowager had always treated me like her own granddaughter, with deep affection. After hearing the news, I personally traveled to invite a reclusive divine physician from the mountains back to the capital to set Prince Shou's leg. I also took a century-old ginseng root from my own dowry and presented it to help Prince Shou recuperate. Out of consideration for my sincerity, the Empress Dowager did not punish Alan, but a rift had formed. From then on, she became distant, never treating me with the same closeness as before. My relationship with the imperial family had been strained because of the Yun family, and only today did I truly realize my own mistake. My imperial uncle was admiring flowers with the noble consort in the imperial garden. Spring still held a lingering chill, yet the peonies in the palace were blooming with a breathtaking beauty. On the noble consort's wrist, an exquisite jadeite bangle of the highest quality shimmered in the sun, glowing with a gentle warmth. That was the apology gift I had brought her. The noble consort slowly twisted the bangle, glancing at me with a mocking smile. Her lips curved with a certain satisfaction. Our dear princess, who defended that Yun girl so fiercely before. How did you end up in this state of divorce? I clenched my fists inside my sleeves, bowing my head and silently enduring her barbs. My imperial uncle took a sip of tea, not reprimanding me, but merely stating flatly, Evander has achieved great merit this time. I understood the hidden meaning in his words. Evander had just won a major victory against the northern enemies. His reputation was at its peak. My imperial uncle would certainly not stand up for me at this moment, but I hadn't come seeking justice anyway. As I passed by the noble consort, I murmured softly, I will no longer manage the Yun family's affairs. In the future, your ladyship need not make things difficult for me anymore. A flicker of understanding lit the noble consort's eyes, and a profound smile touched her lips, but she said nothing more. Leaving the imperial garden, I went straight to the Empress Dowager's palace. I knelt at the entrance for half a watch before head attendant Qing finally summoned me inside. Seeing my aggrieved and pitiful appearance, the Empress Dowager finally softened, calling me to her side. She glanced at me, her expression one of iron not forging into steel, and chided gently. Have you finally learned your lesson this time? I nodded vigorously, like pounding garlic. The Yun family's affairs. From now on I will never interfere again. The chief steward personally brought the dowry inventory list to the Yun residence, clearly stating our intentions. Following the divorce, all of the princess's dowry must be returned to the estate. The process will inevitably cause some disturbance. We ask for General Yun's understanding. Evander sat in the main hall, appearing perfectly composed, holding a teacup and sipping slowly. That very tea was the Biluo Chun I had brought. The chief steward saw this, smiled, and gestured for his attendants to present 2 more boxes of the same tea. We only just learned that General Yun is so fond of the tea our princess brought. In that case, please enjoy a few more cups. We fear that after today's divorce, it may not be so easy to drink it again. Evander's hand paused. His lips tightened and he silently placed the cup on the table, his expression darkening noticeably. In contrast, Sylvia, hearing that the dowry was being moved back to the estate of Prince Jin, immediately flew into a rage. She blocked the chests, her voice shrieking. So what if they're divorced? Alora was still a woman of our Yun family. How can things that were brought in be taken out again? Those things will all be part of my dowry in the future. Why should we return them to her? The chief steward maintained his polite smile, but his words were venomous. To be so lacking in basic decency. It seems our master was blind back then, to have chosen General Yun, and to have expended so much effort to support the Yun family through their calamities. It appears General Yun is not very grateful for His Majesty's grace either, if he intends to keep the princess's dowry for himself. The chief steward paused, his voice dropping lower. Alas, it is because His Highness Prince Jin has been guarding the fiefdoms for so long, leaving the princess with no one in the capital to back her. She had only just lost her memory when she was forced into a divorce. That so-called divorce agreement, one wonders if it is even real. Evander's face shifted from green to white, finally settling on a shade as dark as ink. He roared at Sylvia. You shallow fool. I am a meritorious general of this nation. How could the emperor possibly treat me unfairly? What does her dowry amount to? It's nothing but a few trinkets. However, when the chief steward ordered his men to start moving those few trinkets, Evander's expression could no longer maintain its indifference. From solid dragon carved beds to bolts of silk and brocade, from chests of pearls and jade to rare porcelain, box after box was carried out of the Yin residence. Back then, to show his indifference toward me, Evander hadn't even bothered to look at the 10-mile procession of my dowry. He assumed I was like any other noble lady in the capital, with a meager dowry. He had no idea how boundless my dowry truly was. Evander's expression grew complicated, a flicker of regret appearing in his eyes. It wasn't until the chief steward instructed his men to dig up the osmanthus tree in the courtyard that Evander truly panicked. "Stop! Why are you touching that osmanthus tree?" Evander shouted, blocking the men who were preparing to dig, his voice laced with fury. "The estate of Prince Jin is going too far. That osmanthus tree was over 100 years old, its branches lush, its trunk so thick it would take 2 men to encircle it. It was a symbol of a family's enduring prosperity." The chief steward merely glanced at Evander, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Going too far. General Yun, perhaps you are unaware. This tree was dug from the imperial garden. His Majesty the Emperor personally bestowed it upon the princess. In 100 years of this dynasty, only our princess has received such an honor. This tree is part of her dowry, and a dowry is the personal property of the wife. Now that they are divorced, it must naturally be returned. Does General Yun have any further objections?" Evander's heart was filled with resentment, but in the end, he could only step back slowly. He watched helplessly as the 100-year-old tree was uprooted by dozens of men, carefully carried out, leaving a gaping hole in the courtyard. Before he could recover, the chief steward turned and ordered his men into the courtyards of Alan, Lady Yun and Sylvia. Alan was not home. The famous calligraphy scrolls in his study were brought out one by one. His Huizhou inkstone and Huzhou brushes were laid out on the ground, leaving Evander stunned. In Lady Yun's courtyard, a jadeite necklace she hadn't yet taken, an ivory screen, and roux, where teacups were all carefully sealed and prepared for packing. But in Sylvia's courtyard, when her jewelry box was opened, she flew into a frenzy, lunging forward to grab it, screaming, "Get out! Who allowed you to touch my things?" Seeing this, the killing intent on Evander flared. He shoved a servant from the prince's estate to the ground. "You are truly going too far. You won't even spare my sister's jewelry." The chief steward remained unruffled. He opened the dowry list and, item by item, explained to Evander. "This phoenix hairpin is a relic of the late empress. Leaving it in the Yun residence would be inappropriate. This jade bangle was part of the Empress Dowager's own dowry, a special favor she granted the princess. And this 8-treasure gold, threaded bracelet. His Highness Prince Jin searched all of Jiangnan to find the master artisan to craft it. The princess's nickname is even engraved inside. These are all the property of our master. How do they belong to Miss Yun? Would General Yun like to check the list again?" Evander snatched the list and began to read it seriously, line by line. The more he read, the more his face flushed. Feeling his dignity being trampled, he snorted coldly and threw the list to the ground, turning his head away, unwilling to look anymore. But Sylvia cared nothing for the origins of these items. She only felt that what was in her hands was hers. She clutched the jewelry box, sat on the ground, and wailed, tugging on Evander's sleeve, crying for him to stand up for her. The chief steward glanced at Evander, his expression feigning consideration for him. If the Yun family does not fear His Majesty's wrath and does not fear the ridicule of the entire empire, then by all means keep everything. Evander clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white, suppressing the rage in his heart. "Fine, take it all. If Elora thinks she can use these trifles to force me to bow my head, she can dream on." His words were strong, but the regret in his heart only deepened. Finally, the chief steward ordered his men to fill in the well in the courtyard before calmly leading his people away. Evander stood beside the newly filled well, looking at the ravaged courtyard, his heart a tangle of bitterness, regret, and unresignation. Before the palace banquet began, Sylvia came to find me. This banquet was to reward the triumphant generals. As the sister of Evander, the man who had achieved great merit, Sylvia was naturally qualified to attend. However, her seat was near the door, far from mine. When she ran over, her nose was beaded with sweat and her hair was slightly disheveled. She tugged at her new dress, standing before me with a proud and arrogant smile. "So what if you took your dowry back? Big brother still bought me a new dress." She reached up to adjust the golden butterfly clasp in her hair, harumphing coldly. "You refused to part with one hairpin. You probably don't know, but the moment you left, Big brother moved sister Jiao Yu into the estate. You exhausted all your schemes to marry my brother, but didn't you still end up leaving with nothing? It was true that I loved Evander, but I was never so base as to abandon all dignity to beg for the marriage. It was my father, Prince Jin, who saw my feelings and subtly hinted at his intention to marry me to Evander. At the time, Evander was overjoyed, wishing he could broadcast to the world that I was willingly marrying him. Yet he still put on a show of indifference. I never imagined the Yun family thought I was the one who had schemed and forced the marriage. I leisurely looked Sylvia up and down, finding her utterly ridiculous. My imperial uncle was rewarding the 3 armies and never treated any general unfairly. Evander, as a lieutenant general, was rewarded with the title of Marquis of 1,000 households, 1,000 taels of silver, and 100 mu of fine land. The income from the land and fief would not come until next spring. All he had to spend right now was that 1,000 taels of silver. To a commoner, 1,000 taels was a lifetime's fortune. But to the Yun family, newly entered into the ranks of the nobility, it was practically nothing. When I retrieved my dowry, the servants from the estate of Prince Jin, furious on my behalf, had secretly shredded the bolts of fine shoe brocade I had once gifted Sylvia. Her current dress had been hastily made, thread still hung from the hem and the fabric was shoddy, yet she still had the confidence to parade in front of me to show off. It was laughable. I smiled, taking a sip of grape wine, idly turning the jadeite nail guard the Empress Dowager had just gifted me. I spoke nonchalantly. I truly do not remember who you are right now, and I care even less who has moved into your esteemed residence. However, I must advise you, the material of the dress you are wearing today is truly subpar. To attend a palace banquet like this, I fear it is not presentable. As soon as I finished, several young ladies from noble families surrounding me covered their mouths and giggled. When the princess was still at the Yun residence, everything in their home was of the highest quality. Look at Miss Yun now, wearing such inferior cloth. Isn't it disgraceful? It's the princess's fault for being too good to the Yun family, making them forget their own status. They're just mud elevated by silk. Miss Yun, you should hurry back. Your seat is so far away, you might not make it back by the time the banquet starts. Sylvia's face turned bright red. She pointed at them, shouting angrily, My big brother is a great hero. How dare you insult me? I'll go tell my brother. This, predictably, was met with another round of laughter. Sylvia truly believed that just because her brother had achieved military merit, she, too, could enjoy glory and power, becoming second only to one and above all others. But a minor title of a marquise of 1,000 households was, in the eyes of these established aristocratic families, nothing. Sylvia stormed off, and the banquet officially began. One by one, the generals knelt before my imperial uncle, their eyes red as they raised their wine cups to accept their rewards, draining them in one gulp. Afterward, each man beat his chest and swore an oath to be loyal to the emperor and the country, willing to die on the battlefield for the nation. Evander, as the left flank lieutenant general with outstanding achievements, should have been in the first row. But for some unknown reason he was placed in the third row, in an extremely inconspicuous spot. He must have assumed I was playing tricks behind the scenes, because as he returned to his seat, he deliberately walked past my table, his face black as charcoal, and intentionally knocked over my cup of grape wine. The purple, red liquid spilled out, soaking my skirt and robes. In the middle of a palace banquet, I couldn't make a scene. I could only stand up to go and change. As I passed him, I clearly heard him hiss through gritted teeth, "So what if we are divorced? You are still a high and mighty princess, but I have rendered service to this country. You use such petty tricks to take personal revenge." How venomous. When I loved him, everything about him seemed wonderful. Only now did I realize that apart from his bravery on the battlefield, he was truly worthless. I stopped walking. I did not go to change my robes. Instead, I turned and walked directly to the center of the great hall, kneeling gracefully. I performed a full kowtow. The northern enemies have plagued our borders for too long. Today, the world is at peace and the weapons are silenced, all thanks to your majesty's divine grace. Hearing this, a smile immediately appeared on my imperial uncle's lips. He was clearly pleased with my words. I then shifted my plea, my voice carrying a note of grievance. Just now, General Yun, for reasons unknown, accused this servant of taking personal revenge and obstructing his future. This servant is terrified. I beg your majesty for clarity. My imperial uncle frowned slightly, his gaze shifting to Evander, his tone laced with displeasure. "Vander, is this true?" Evander's expression changed instantly. He scrambled forward and knelt, his voice frantic. "Your Majesty, I misspoke. I beg your Majesty's punishment." Evander had always relied on two things: my affection for him and his own military achievements. But when neither of those held any weight, what did he have left? I spoke sternly, "General Yun, since this servant fell into the water and lost her memory, I recall nothing of the past. Even if there was unpleasantness, we are now divorced and our ties are severed. The matter of rewards is decided by your majesty alone. How could I dare to interfere? If General Yun insists on blaming me for this, then I have no choice but to silently accept the accusation. The great hall fell utterly silent. Even the music that had been drifting through the air suddenly stopped. All eyes in the hall turned to me and Evander. The atmosphere was as tense as a drawn bowstring. Cold sweat beaded on Evander's forehead, dripping down his chin onto the floor. He didn't dare wipe it. He could only kowtow repeatedly, his voice trembling as he cried out, "I would not dare. I would never, ever dare." He thought I would be as I was before, quietly enduring his accusations without a word of complaint. He never expected I would bring the matter directly before the emperor, causing him to lose all face in front of the entire court. After only a year apart, the princess who had once meekly obeyed him had changed beyond recognition. A general with merit could not be punished too severely. My imperial uncle merely reprimanded him with a few words before dismissing him. I didn't spare him another glance, simply following a palace maid to a side hall to change my robes. When I returned to my seat, the banquet was nearing its end. Several young noblewomen immediately gathered around, their faces alight with schadenfreude. After they finished their chirping tale, I learned that while I was changing, Sylvia had somehow wandered into the imperial garden and fallen into the lake. The lake water was bone-chilling. When she was pulled out, she was shivering violently, a complete mess, looking nothing like a high-born lady. Her clothes were soaked through, clinging to her body, even revealing her bright pink undergarments. I heard the man who rescued her was a stable hand from the palace. The Yun family originally rose to prominence by breeding horses for the founding emperor. Marrying a stable hand wouldn't be a total waste. I glanced toward the noble consort, seated near the emperor. Her expression was serene as she casually ordered a maid to brew some ginger soup to ward off the chill. I understood. Without my protection, it was only a matter of time before the noble consort made her move against Sylvia. I had just averted my gaze when I saw Evander approaching, carrying a pale-faced Sylvia. Though she was in a new set of clothes, Sylvia was still trembling, clearly terrified. Evander stared at me with dark, venomous eyes, hissing through clenched teeth. "Well done, Alora. You claim all feelings are severed, yet you still strike at my sister. If you don't give me an explanation today, don't blame me for being discourteous." I leaned back slightly, a wave of wariness washing over me. He truly wanted to pin every dirty thing on me. It was my fault for treating him too well in the past, making him think I was so easy to bully and control. "General Yun, disaster comes from the mouth. You should think carefully before you speak," I warned, my voice tinged with ice. A cold light flashed in Evander's eyes, and his voice hardened. "I have been away from the capital for a year and only just returned. Aside from a small disagreement with the princess, I have no feud with anyone. Just moments ago, I accidentally spilled wine on the princess's dress, and only the princess left the banquet at that time." His words were a clear insinuation that I had orchestrated Sylvia's fall into the water as revenge. Before he could finish, I cut him off. "The side hall for changing is far from the imperial garden. Does the princess possess the ability to fly? If General Yun truly wishes to find the culprit, then please present your evidence. At that time, it will not be too late to question me." Evander stared at me for a long moment before letting out a cold threat. "Alora, if I find out you were behind this, even if you are of imperial blood, I will absolutely not spare you." Watching his retreating back, I merely curled my lips in a disdainful smile. Not spare me. We would have to see if anyone was willing to spare the Yun family. Originally, after Evander's triumphant return, besides the generous rewards, the court was supposed to arrange a suitable official position for him. Yet, half a month had passed. The other lieutenants who served under him had all been promoted to good posts. Only he remained stuck with the empty title of Marquis of 1,000 households, left to languish in his residence, ignored by all. Evander began to grow restless. He hurriedly sent out invitation cards hoping to network and find a path to advancement. But the Yun family was not an established aristocratic house. His grandfather's highest rank was merely a 7th-rank captain. Evander's achievements were already the pinnacle of his lineage. But in the capital, where power was concentrated, his status was still nothing. The invitations he sent out vanished like stones in the sea. What worried him more was that as a victorious general, he should have been celebrated. Instead, he was forgotten by the world as if he had never existed. Some officials even showed him open avoidance and disgust. The Yun residence became desolately quiet, not a single visitor came to the door. At first, Evander wasn't concerned. His merits were undeniable. He believed he would be appointed sooner or later. He even gathered a few of his old subordinates for a banquet at a tavern to celebrate. Under the influence of alcohol, Evander slammed the table and boasted loudly, "So what if she's a princess? Wasn't she still tossed aside by me like a worn-out shoe? Now I've returned victorious, ennobled and rewarded. Why would I need to rely on any woman? Let's see who dares to say I, Evander, am not worthy of Elora now." The rough soldiers all chimed in. "What's a princess? Our General Yun is worthy of a true princess. All those so-called high-born ladies should line up for the general to choose." Even the northern enemies wet themselves at the sound of General Yun's name. The court still needs to rely on the general. Those words were somehow leaked. The families who had originally considered a match with the Yun family immediately changed their minds and withdrew without a trace. The imperial censors even submitted several memorials impeaching Evander, but the emperor suppressed them all, leaving them unaddressed. Ironically, Evander remained oblivious. He even took Jiao Yu riding and parading through the capital. As misfortune would have it, I ran into them while I was at the splendid brocade pavilion choosing fabric. Jiao Yu's eyes fell on the bolt of precious silk in my hands, a spark of interest in her gaze. Evander naturally noticed her desire. He had brought her out today specifically to please her. He immediately called the shopkeeper over, pointed at the fabric in my hands, and said loudly, "That bolt of silk. I'll take it." The shopkeeper showed him no deference, refusing flatly. "Our shop operates on a first-come-served basis. The princess saw this bolt first. Unless she decides not to take it, we cannot sell it to a second customer." Only then did Evander pretend to notice me, a faint smirk on his face, his eyes challenging. "Princess, do me a favor. I want this bolt of silk." I nodded lightly, not arguing. I even thoughtfully instructed my attendant to have the silk wrapped carefully for him. This fabric pavilion was part of my dowry. If Evander wanted to spend his own money to buy it, why wouldn't I happily oblige? Consider yourself sensible. Evander was visibly pleased, believing I still cared for him. He even thought my concession was an attempt to back down and reconcile. But when he learned the price of the silk was 250 taels of silver, his face immediately turned ashen. I tilted my head, smiling with feigned innocence. "General Yun, surely you cannot afford it." Evander forced a stiff smile. "The princess jests. We were husband and wife for a year. Surely the princess knows that such a sum is well within my means." The people around us had already begun to whisper, their mocking gazes intensifying. Evander tried to maintain his composure, desperate to salvage his dignity from the floor, but I had no intention of letting him. I batted my eyelashes innocently. "But I've lost my memory. I don't remember anything from before." Seeing that I wouldn't give him even a shred of dignity, Evander gritted his teeth and called loudly to the shopkeeper. "Put it on my account. I'll send the money later." The shopkeeper chuckled, but his eyes were cold. "General, everyone in the capital knows our splendid brocade pavilion never sells on credit. If the general is short on silver, please come back another day. However, our best silks are in high demand. We cannot guarantee this bolt will still be here waiting for you." Waves of ridicule washed over him from all directions. Evander felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He finally clenched his fist and ordered his young attendant back to the residence to fetch the silver. Not long after, the attendant ran back, panting, and whispered cautiously, "General, second young master just returned to the residence and took all the silver." Evander was livid and immediately stormed off toward the Xianxia tavern in pursuit of Alan. I, meanwhile, gently handed the beautifully wrapped bolt of silk to Jiao Yu. I spoke to her softly. "You can take this back first. The splendid brocade pavilion will send someone to the general's residence at the end of the month to collect the payment. If you see anything else you like elsewhere, miss, you may also put it on the general's account." Jiao Yu's eyes widened in surprised delight. "Princess, you are so kind. You're nothing like what Miss Yun said. She called you cruel, petty, and calculating." She spoke with a naive innocence, clearly not understanding the undercurrents of our exchange. She genuinely clutched the silk and left happily. Watching her retreating figure, I smiled faintly, sighing inwardly. The women from the border truly were simple. They had no idea how many hidden daggers lay beneath the capital's glittering facade. Then, I too quietly followed in the direction of the Xianlo. Evander was putting on a good show. How could I miss it? As I arrived below the tavern, I could already hear a commotion from upstairs. It turned out that the second young master, Alan, was at it again, brawling. Alan had used his share of the reward money to buy out the courtesan Xiao Chutao from the madam. But when he arrived, he found her entertaining another client. He flew into a rage and burst into the room. Last time I broke your leg, you still haven't learned your lesson. This time, I'll wring your neck. But this time, Prince Sho was prepared. He just waved his hand and a dozen guards rushed in, pinning Alan to the floor. Alan, still oblivious, continued to roar and curse. My brothers aren't here today, so you get to be arrogant. Just wait, I'll go get them. If you have the guts, let me go. Just then, Evander arrived. Alan didn't recognize Prince Sho, but Evander certainly did. Alan thought his big brother had come to back him up, but the moment Evander saw Prince Sho, he dropped to his knees. Prince Sho didn't even glance at him, simply ordering his guards to break Alan's legs. Evander clenched his fists and intervened, questioning loudly, just for a courtesan. Prince Sho, you would break the leg of a meritorious general's family member. I fear this is improper. Prince Sho's expression was icy, his words like frost. Then I invite General Yun to judge for me. Just for a courtesan, a meritorious general's family member broke my leg. How should that be handled? Evander was speechless. Before he could respond, he heard his brother, still pinned to the floor, screech. So what if I broke your leg? My sister-in-law is the princess. Princess Haiyang, personally ennobled by the emperor. If you dare touch me, I'll have you dead without a body. Big brother, go get sister-in-law. Let's see if he still dares to be so arrogant. I stood outside, listening clearly. I was both furious and amused. After all this time, Alan still didn't know I had divorced Evander. He was still daring to cause trouble, relying on my status to act recklessly. He was truly stupid to the core. By now, Evander understood the whole story. He was breathing heavily, wishing he could tear his brother to shreds on the spot. Prince Sho snorted. The guards no longer hesitated. Right in front of Evander, they brutally broke both of Alan's legs. Alan's agonizing screams echoed through the Zuishianlo, chilling everyone who heard it. And Evander could only stand and watch, completely powerless. When Evander returned to the residence, he immediately ordered an investigation. When he learned exactly what his siblings had done, he was so angry he swept the entire table clean. He roared at Sylvia and Alan. One cowered in a corner, the other moaned on his bed. You two have truly audacious. Sylvia, you dared to touch the noble consort's niece. Do you really think you're imperial royalty? And you, Alan? Do you know who you hit? That is the Empress Dowager's youngest son, the Emperor's own blood brother. Only then did Evander seem to wake from a dream. He finally understood why he had been ranked behind others during the reward ceremony. It was definitely not my doing. No wonder he had won victory after victory, yet no one paid him any mind. No wonder he had been left at home for so many days with no appointment, no inquiries. Every mystery now had an answer. Evander couldn't help but tremble, an unprecedented sense of helplessness washing over him. Sylvia was terrified by her brother's violent rage and hid, not daring to speak. Only Alan, still clueless, shouted back from his bed. So what if it's the noble consort? So what if it's Prince Sho? Didn't sister-in-law already deliver apology gifts? Hasn't the matter been settled? We were just having a little fun. With sister-in-law as the princess, what is there to be afraid of, right? Where is sister-in-law? I'm injured like this, and she hasn't even come to see me. Hurry, tell her to go to the palace. Request an audience with the emperor, beg the Empress Dowager. My legs can't be broken for nothing. Hearing this, Evander closed his eyes. He finally understood what I had paid for this family during his 1-year absence. Evander's shoulders slumped, his voice dropping so low it was almost inaudible. There is no more princess sister-in-law. There is no one left to shield you. Alora and I are divorced. Alan pushed himself up, his face a mask of horror, momentarily forgetting the pain in his legs. Divorced. His shriek was higher than a palace eunuch's. Big brother, are you insane? How could you let her go without her, relying on our family's meager income? We can't even afford to dress properly. Those young masters in the capital are only willing to flatter me because I have a princess for a sister-in-law. Hurry up and bring the princess back. We absolutely cannot get divorced. Evander didn't answer. He just silently turned and left. As a triumphant general, how could he lower himself to beg someone? Moreover, the divorce itself had been obtained through deceit. That night, he tossed and turned, thinking for a long time. At dawn, Evander personally wrote a letter and dispatched men to the mountain temple to welcome his mother back to the residence. His mother, Lady Yun, came from a family that had once produced an imperial consort. If Lady Yun stepped in, perhaps she could salvage the Yun family's situation and help them overcome this crisis. Just as evening fell, the carriage stopped at the Yun family's gate. Evander and Sylvia immediately went out to greet her. Even Alan had someone carry him out. Sylvia pouted and complained, "Mother, you're finally back, you don't know. Alora and Big Brother got divorced, and our residence is in chaos. My clothes and jewelry were all stolen by Alora. And second brother's calligraphy, and your precious porcelain in your courtyard, all taken. She's so arrogant. Mother, you must go to the palace and see the imperial consort. Ask her to stand up for us." Alan chimed in anxiously, "Mother, you really should go to the palace. It would be best if you can find a way to nullify the divorce decree. Big Brother is too proud to say it, but our Yun family cannot be without the princess." A greedy light flashed in his eyes as he sighed. This past year, the benefits the princess brought our family were endless. Big Brother's promotion, my sister's marriage into a prestigious family, all of it depends on the princess. Evander did not object to canceling the divorce. He just frowned and cut them off, his voice impatient. Mother has just endured a long journey. She should rest for a few days first. Going to the palace is not urgent. After speaking, Evander lifted the carriage curtain and extended a hand inside, his voice softening. "Mother, please, alight from the carriage." However, inside the carriage, Lady Yun did not immediately respond. She hesitated for a long time before finally taking her son's hand and stepping out, one slow step at a time. When the three siblings saw their mother's current appearance, they froze as if struck by lightning, gaping in stunned silence. Lady Yun awkwardly cradled her high, swollen belly, speaking guiltily. "Couldn't you have waited one more month? The roads are so rough. Did you have to summon me back at this exact moment?" The three siblings' eyes were glued to her enormous stomach, completely forgetting their own complaints. After a long silence, Evander's eyes turned crimson. He pointed a trembling finger at his mother and roared, "This is your reason for going to the temple to pray for blessings. Mother, you are shameless, at your age carrying on with another man. And where is that adulterer? I must kill him. Kill him." Before he finished, Lady Yun slapped him hard across the face. Her eyes were red as she burst into tears. "Your father has been dead for over 10 years. I raised you 3 children on my own. I have done my duty to the Yun family and to your father in heaven. I have not failed you as your mother. Now you all have your own achievements and can support the family. Why must you force me to live out the rest of my days in a cold courtyard, lonely until I die?" Evander touched his stinging cheek, his eyes filling with even more disgust. "You are a woman of the Yun family. Sacrificing for the Yun family is your sacred duty. Go inside. Immediately call a physician to brew an abortifacient and get rid of that bastard child." Lady Yun glared at her son, her eyes filled with determination. "This child. I am keeping it. Whoever dares to touch my child, I will fight them to the death, even if it costs me my life." Evander hadn't slept all night, waiting for his mother's return. He hadn't even had a sip of water. Now, the suffocating anger in his chest nearly made him faint. He clutched his chest and screamed, "Adulteress!" His hand even moved to the hilt of his sword. Alan and Sylvia rushed forward to hold him back, but Lady Yun remained resolute she would give birth to this child. I stood in the shadows and gave a small wave. Immediately, someone slipped quietly into the Yun residence and set fire to the woodshed in the back courtyard. Fire! Fire! Thick smoke billowed, alarming the entire neighborhood. Residents poured out, some to fight the fire, others to watch the spectacle. Evander was terrified. He quickly grabbed his mother, trying to force her back into the carriage. He knew that in her current state, she absolutely could not be seen by outsiders. Unfortunately, it was too late. Someone had already recognized Lady Yun and shouted, "Everyone look. Isn't that Lady Yun? She said she was going to the mountains to pray for half a year. How did she return pregnant?" The people fighting the fire immediately stopped and crowded around, pointing and gossiping. So, praying for blessings was a lie. A secret affair was the truth. How audacious. A temple is a place of pure cultivation. How could it be defied like this? Tell me, are the 3 Yun children really the flesh and blood of the late Captain Yun? The whispers rose like a tide, and the contemptuous stares of the crowd felt like knives, leaving the 3 Yun siblings with nowhere to hide. Evander's face was ashen. He roared at the crowd to disperse. But more and only more people gathered, and his shouts were drowned out. Sylvia tried to help her brother, clawing at the faces of those who were slandering them, only to have her hair pulled and be slapped several times. As for Alan, the attendants had all run off to fight the fire. He was left on the ground, and in the chaos, someone stepped on his broken legs, causing him to faint from the pain. Amidst the chaos, I saw several Imperial censors arrive. I turned and slipped away silently. I must say, of all the Yun family, the one I hated most was Lady Yun. She feared that after I married in, I would use my status to suppress her. So she colluded with the imperial consort in the palace to frame my father. They accused Prince Jin of having improper intentions toward the imperial consort. Although my imperial uncle trusted my father, he feared the scandal. He issued an edict sending my father to the distant fief of Haidong, forbidding his return without a decree. It was precisely because my father was no longer in the capital that Evander thought I was isolated and easy to bully. I had known for a long time that Lady Yun was keeping a young male actor. I was even the one who had my personal maid suggest the idea of going to the temple to ensure a safe birth. At the time, I thought I would keep this secret. If I ever had a conflict with Lady Yun and Evander sided with her, I wouldn't be left completely powerless. Now that we were divorced, I naturally had no reason to cover for anyone. Not only would I not cover for her, I would add fuel to the fire, ensuring the whole world saw exactly what kind of people the Yun family truly were. Evander had finally recognized the reality without me. He was facing total ruin. Late that night, I had just returned to the estate of Prince Jin and was preparing for a late snack when Evander himself rushed over. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Princess." I pretended to see a stranger, not even sparing him a glance, and turned to enter the estate. He hurried forward to block my path. Only then did I stop and turn back, asking coolly, "General Yun, what matter brings you here so late at night?" Evander looked hesitant, struggling to speak. This. Seeing his duplicitous act, I felt a wave of irritation. He was so used to putting on a show for me. My expression remained unchanged as I said flatly, "If there is no matter of importance, I will take my leave. Please, see yourself out, General." Evander gritted his teeth and finally forced the words out. "Princess, in my heart, I never truly wanted to divorce you. It was only because the 1-year divorce agreement was proposed by you that I was forced to comply. To tell you the truth, in my heart, I still have you." Ha! I almost laughed. Evander must truly be insane. He was betting on my amnesia to push all the blame onto me. I feigned curiosity. Then why did I propose such an agreement? At the time, the princess was determined to marry me. My father and the princess feared I might fall in the northern campaign. They proposed that plan merely to protect the princess's reputation. I curled my lip, looking up at the man I had once loved so deeply. His shamelessness was so profound it was almost comical. "Princess, I want to nullify the divorce decree. I wish to reunite with you. As for Jiao Yu, I will send her back to the border. I will never let the princess suffer any grievance. Please, come back to the residence with me." Go back to his residence. To do what? To continue cleaning up his messes. Evander's face was a mask of sincerity. If one ignored the fist he was clenching tightly inside his sleeve, it was a fine performance. Forbearance, thick-skinned begging. It seemed he truly was at his wit's end. I slowly turned my back to him, my voice light, as if dissolving into the night breeze. "General Yun, have you forgotten? I have lost my memory. The night wind is strong. Please, return home." The very next day, Evander was impeached by the imperial censors. This time, my imperial uncle showed no leniency. He threw the entire pile of previous memorials, all accusing Evander, directly at his feet. The generals who'd fought alongside Evander stepped forward to defend him. "Your Majesty, General Yun is a rare talent. We cannot destroy a great general over a small domestic matter." Someone else chimed in, "Even Jade has flaws. We beg your Majesty to reconsider." But others refuted it. Cultivate the self, regulate the family, govern the state, bring peace to the world. If he cannot even manage his own household, how can he serve in the court? The two sides argued endlessly, until finally, the focus suddenly shifted to me. If not for the princess's 1-year divorce agreement, General Yun could have married a virtuous wife to manage his household. The chaos in the Yun family. It is all because of the princess. Hearing this, Evander's eyes lit up. He nodded vigorously, eager to shift all blame onto me. It was the princess who made the agreement first. I did not dare to defy her. I slowly walked into the great hall, my smile as gentle as the spring breeze, but my eyes as cold as ice. I looked directly at Evander and said, each word clear, "That divorce decree, wasn't that forged by General Yun, taking advantage of the fact that I had lost my memory?" Evander's face paled. He denied it frantically. "Princess, what are you saying?" "Right. Just last night, I was still insisting that I remembered nothing. But then I began to recount the affairs of the Yun family from the past year, big and small, in perfect detail. I even revealed the secret trusting spot under the gardenia bush where a maid and a servant had buried their love tokens, which I had since had dug up. Evander's jaw dropped. He remembered his desperate pleading from the night before, and his face turned crimson. Not from shame, but from pure, unadulterated rage. He never imagined I remembered everything, and that he had been performing like a clown in the Golden Hall. I laughed softly. It was just something said in a moment of anger, yet General Yun used it as his reason for divorce. Backed into a corner, Evander made one last, desperate attempt. The princess must have just regained her memory, and is now unwilling to admit to our past agreement. He truly won't give up until he sees his own coffin. I waved my hand, ordering Jiao Yu to be brought into the hall. It was her first time being scrutinized by so many. She was as timid as a small rabbit, clearly terrified. I smiled to reassure her, then pointed at Evander and asked clearly, "Did General Yun ever promise to marry you?" Evander tried to interrupt, but 2 imperial guards seized his arms, holding him immobile. Jiao Yu glanced at him, seemingly confused by the question, and answered honestly, "After I saved General Yun, he said he wanted to marry me. He said his official wife, the princess, was arrogant and unreasonable, always using her status to oppress him. He said he felt suffocated." She paused, then pulled a red letter from her sleeve. He also promised that when he returned, he would find a way to divorce, and then welcome me into the family as his official wife with an 8-bearer sedan chair. This is the betrothal letter he wrote for me. Evander had clearly forgotten that night of passion, when he had personally written the letter that would seal his own fate. His face was ashen. He stopped struggling. His eyes were hollow, filled only with the despair of knowing all was lost. In consideration of Evander's past military service, the death penalty for deceiving the emperor was waived. It was commuted to 30 strokes with the heavy rod, administered in open court. Prince Shou invited me to watch the opera with him. When I heard Prince Shou order his men to prepare salt water, ready to splash it on Evander's wounds to wake him if he fainted, I just lowered my head silently. Prince Shou snorted at me. "What, you still feel sorry for him?" I immediately shook my head. "Evander is not worthy of my pity." Little imperial uncle jest. I am just thinking how blind I must have been. I turned and discreetly ordered a palace attendant to have a few small nails hammered into the heads of the rods. The eunuchs administering the punishment glanced at me and Prince Shou, and in their hearts, they all lit 3 sticks of incense for Evander's soul. Everything that happened afterward was recounted to me by Prince Shou. He hated the Yun family to the bone and relished their misery. By the time Evander was carried back to the residence, he was a commoner. His rank was gone, his title stripped. The land and silver he had been awarded were all ordered reclaimed by the court. The Yun family sold everything they owned just to scrape by. Their life of luxury was gone forever. But the disaster wasn't over. Lady Yun went into premature labor, giving birth to a 7-month-old boy. Evander, despite his horrific injuries, dragged himself up, intending to kill the child. But in her furious grief, Lady Yun grabbed a knife and swung it, chopping off his right thumb. From that day on, he could never hold a sword again, losing his last and only chance to ever turn his fortunes, and the stable hand who had rescued Sylvia in the imperial garden. He brazenly brought a matchmaker to their door, loudly proclaiming that he had touched Sylvia's body and must take responsibility for her. How could Sylvia ever agree to marry a stable hand? She raised an earth-shattering fuss, refusing to obey. In the end, the Yun clan elders held her down, stuffed her into a wedding sedan, and married her off. As he told me this, Prince Shou glanced toward the noble consort's palace, his voice tinged with sarcasm. "My imperial brother's noble consort is truly a talent. She is brilliant at fanning the flames and taking advantage of others' misfortunes." I just smiled softly and replied, "When it comes to fishing in troubled waters, little imperial uncle, no one can compare to you." Alan was now completely crippled. Prince Shou, seeing the Yun family was too preoccupied to care, had Alan sent to the Zui Xianlo, making him the personal doorman for Xiao Chitao. He seemed quite pleased with himself, laughing as he said, "Am I not helping him realize his dream?" As for me, I had already sent Jiao Yu back to the border. As she left, she was overjoyed, her eyes filled with relief and anticipation. After those first few days of sightseeing in the capital, Evander locked me in the residence to learn rules. The etiquette matron even hit me with a cane, so I fought back and knocked her to the ground. She immediately ran to tattle to him, and Sylvia mocked me, calling me a country bumpkin and saying I was unfit to be her sister-in-law. Jiao Yu blinked at me, her eyes sparkling with mischief. That betrothal letter was actually fake. I tricked all of you. I just didn't want to be locked away in that suffocating courtyard for my entire life. She sighed. I just want to go home. I stood atop the city tower, watching her carriage ride away. The evening sky was a brilliant crimson. A sliver of the new moon hung silently overhead. As I watched her carriage vanish over the horizon, an indescribable longing stirred within my heart. I, too, wished to see that desert, to gaze upon the vast sky and boundless earth, and to feel, just once, that limitless freedom and untamable spirit. The end. The sweetest love is the one you find for yourself. When the love Alora held for Evander proved to be an illusion, she discovered a far more powerful love, self-respect. Her strength was not just in enduring, but in the courage to reclaim her identity and her freedom. This story teaches that the end of a toxic relationship is not a failure, but a necessary liberation, opening the door to a future as vast and limitless as the desert sky. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like,